The night settled heavily over the stone citadel, its walls echoing with forgotten whispers of war. A lone scholar, aged 35, walked through the corridors with a lantern in hand, the glow chasing away the shadows. His steps were deliberate, though uncertainty weighed on his shoulders, his breath misting in the chill. Torches sputtered, casting fleeting silhouettes that seemed almost alive. He paused before a grand wooden door, etched with runes, hesitation flickering in his eyes. The burden of his discovery pressed into his chest like iron. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, rattling the glass panes. He whispered a vow to the silence, his voice trembling yet determined. Every beat of his heart seemed louder than the storm. With steadying resolve, he pushed open the door, revealing a chamber of ancient texts. Dust swirled in the lantern light, as if spirits themselves stirred awake. He closed the door behind him, knowing the path forward would forever alter fate. The chamber stretched endlessly, lined with tomes bound in leather and scrolls crumbling with age. The scholar raised his lantern higher, shadows shifting like watchful eyes. A sense of dread lingered, yet wonder filled his gaze. He ran his hand across a shelf, dust coating his fingers, the weight of history heavy in the air. A parchment lay unrolled on a nearby desk, glowing faintly as if alive. His heart pounded as he leaned closer, lips whispering forgotten words. The flickering flame revealed sketches of symbols, stars, and gateways. Outside, the storm raged, thunder shaking the chamber's walls. He knew the answers lay within this text, but also a danger that could not be ignored. His voice faltered as the runes grew brighter, a subtle hum echoing through the shelves. He realized the past was not only preserved here, it was awake, watching, waiting for him to speak further. The parchment's glow spread across the room, casting an otherworldly sheen on stone walls. The scholar steadied his breath, reading the lines aloud, each syllable vibrating in the air. The chamber responded, books trembling on their shelves. His voice cracked, but he pressed forward, determination burning in his eyes. The lantern flickered violently, as if resisting the energy building around him. Wind surged through the cracks, rustling parchment and shaking wood. The ground vibrated, subtle at first, then growing stronger. He clutched the edge of the desk, his voice unwavering despite the chaos. A presence stirred, ancient and powerful, awakening to his call. For a brief moment, silence fell, broken only by his ragged breath. He knew there was no turning back. The words were no longer his. They belonged to something far greater, and it was now listening. A deep rumble shook the chamber as a crack split across the stone floor. The scholar staggered, lantern swinging wildly. From the fissure seeped a pale light, unnatural and cold. He shielded his eyes, but did not retreat. Shelves toppled, ancient scrolls scattering like frightened birds. His breath grew shallow, yet he took a step forward, eyes fixed on the light. The hum grew into a chorus of whispers, thousands of voices overlapping in dissonant harmony. His knees trembled, but his hand reached instinctively toward the glow. The light surged upward, a pillar cutting through the chamber's ceiling, reaching for the storm above. For a moment, his face reflected both terror and reverence. He whispered a single word, "Begin." The chamber seemed to collapse into silence, leaving only the echo of his vow and the faint glow lingering in the air. The glow dimmed, retreating back into the fissure, leaving silence in its wake. The scholar collapsed to his knees, sweat glistening on his brow. His lantern steadied, casting a frail halo of warmth against the dark. He gazed at the parchment still glowing faintly on the desk, the runes pulsing like a heartbeat. His hand hovered over it, trembling with fear and temptation. He closed his eyes, exhaling slowly, whispering a prayer for guidance. The storm outside calmed, raindrops tapping gently against the glass. For the first time, he felt the weight of destiny pressing down, not as a burden, but as a call. Rising to his feet, he tucked the parchment into his robes, resolve hardening. The chamber lay in ruins, but his path was clear. He would carry the knowledge forward, no matter the cost. The meditation hall was thick with incense haze, and Ren sat cross-legged, but his spine bent like a reed under weight. Master Haku said, "Do not chase the breath." Ren said, "But without chasing, it vanishes," and sweat prickled despite the winter cold. Mira whispered, "The breath holds you," but her eyes showed worry, not certainty. Daigo leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, and said, "You pray to silence and call it wisdom." The words cut deep, and Ren flinched as if struck. Elder Sora moved a cushion closer without speaking, her silence like a hand resting steady on his back. Ren tried to still his mind, but images surged. His father's stern gaze, the village noise, the ache of expectations. He said, "Every voice says I must become more," and his chest burned. Master Haku said, "Every voice is wind in an empty valley." Ren wanted to believe, but the echoes grew louder. Mira said, "Let it pass like clouds," yet Ren felt storm, not sky. His knees throbbed, his jaw clenched, and he thought, "This practice is hollow." Master Haku's voice cut through. "You are hollow, and in that you are whole." Night fell early, and lanterns burned in rows across the cloister. Ren carried a bucket of water, each step heavier than the last. Mira said, "You look thin as smoke," but Ren said, "I cannot carry even myself." Daigo laughed, "You cannot carry truth either," and flicked his lighter open, flame briefly reflecting in his eyes. Elder Sora said nothing as she swept, but her broom drew circles that echoed like mantras on the stones. Ren said, "Why do I feel emptier the longer I train?" Mira said, "Perhaps emptiness is the point," though her voice cracked. Ren set down the bucket, water spilling onto his sandals, soaking cold through. He whispered, "The practice makes me smaller, not greater." Master Haku's shadow appeared at the cloister's edge. He said, "Greater is the illusion, smaller holds the truth." Ren clenched his fists, nails cutting skin, and said, "Then I fear I will vanish altogether." The lantern flames bent in a sudden wind, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to listen. The dawn bell rang, yet Ren's eyes were red, sleep stolen by restless thoughts. Mira brought him tea and said, "Even the strongest branches bend." But he muttered, "I am splintered, not bent." Daigo passed, adjusting his cufflinks, and said, "A monk who breaks from meditation, predictable." Ren slammed the cup down, tea spilling, hands trembling. Elder Sora lifted a rag and silently wiped the spill, her calm diffusing his anger. Master Haku entered, robe trailing like riverstone, and said, "The splinter already holds the tree." Ren said, "Then why do I feel nothing?" His voice cracked, throat raw. Mira touched his shoulder lightly and said, "Feeling nothing is still feeling." Ren stared at the steam rising, vanishing in air, and said, "Every breath leaves me behind." Master Haku said, "Every leaving is arrival." The words echoed, but Ren's heart refused to believe. At the garden's edge, frost clung to moss, and Ren knelt with rake in hand. He dragged lines, but they collapsed into chaos. He said, "Even patterns I make fall apart." Mira crouched and said, "Imperfection is still beauty," yet Ren's face darkened. Daigo leaned on the gatepost and said, "A garden that never holds its form, like your mind." Ren gritted teeth, rake shaking. Elder Sora entered quietly, her breath visible, and set a small stone in the sand, anchoring it. Master Haku said, "The garden falls apart because you demand it stand." Ren dropped the rake, voice hoarse. "Then what is the point?" Master Haku said, "To see falling apart." Mira said, "Look, the frost itself shines as it melts." Ren stared, his anger dimming but not gone. Daigo smirked, "Even melting leaves nothing." The wind pulled through pines, and Ren's breath fogged until it merged with the air. Evening fire crackled in the temple hearth, shadows dancing like restless spirits. Ren sat close, arms wrapped around knees, and said, "I am not enough, no matter what I do." Mira said, "Enoughness is not measured, but her voice trembled. Daigo poured wine into his glass and said, "Not enough is truth. Accept it." Ren's jaw tightened as the words burrowed. Elder Sora fed the fire with one thin log, sparks rising like prayers. Master Haku said, "You chase enoughness as if it were outside you." Ren said, "Then why do I feel like a hollow drum?" His voice cracked in the firelight. Mira leaned closer, whispering, "The hollow carries sound." Ren turned to Master Haku and said, "If I let go of striving, who am I?" Master Haku's eyes glowed with ember light as he said, "You are what remains when striving ends." Silence followed, broken only by the pop of wood. Ren's heart pounded, yet for a moment he wondered if the hollow might hold peace. Before dawn the Zendo breathed frost, and candles made small islands of fire. Master Haku said, "Bring me the sound of the bell before it is struck." Ren said, "I will try," and fear rattled like a bead in a gourd. Mira said, "Listen with the body," and her whispers slid across tatami like rain. Daigo stood at the threshold and said, "Silence dressed as riddle is still silence." Elder Sora placed fresh incense, her hands steady as moons. Ren closed his eyes, hunting echoes that never began. He said, "I hear nothing," and the words felt like defeat in a thin coat. Master Haku said, "Nothing is loud when you stop resisting it." Ren pressed his knees into the mat until nerves sang. Mira said, "Let the bell be you," and Ren wanted to weep at the strangeness. Daigo said, "He will call emptiness an answer and clap." Master Haku's gaze did not move, and the room thickened with breath. Ren whispered, "I am hollow," and the candle flickered as if in reply. Elder Sora exhaled once, and the smoke unraveled. Master Haku said, "Return at noon with the bell you cannot hear." The vow fell around Ren like a net of winter rope. Morning broke hard and bright, and frost still clung to the stones. Master Haku said, "Walk with this bowl filled to the lip." Ren said across the courtyard, and the water quivered like a trapped eye. Mira said, "Let the steps walk you," and held his gaze. Daigo said, "A child's test," and flicked his lighter closed. Elder Sora placed the bowl in Ren's hands, her eyes kind and unreadable. Ren stepped, and a bead spilled, then two more. He hissed, "I cannot still my feet," and heat flushed his neck. Master Haku said, "Do not still your feet, still the hunger to arrive." Ren clenched, and more water leapt the rim. Mira said, "Breathe down to the souls," yet panic rose like smoke in wind. Daigo said, "Arrive nowhere and you pass." Ren stopped, shame burning louder than the cold. Elder Sora quietly offered a cloth, and Ren saw his shaking. Master Haku said, "Return again and again." Ren nodded, and the bright day felt sharp as glass. Night gathered at the river gorge, and the waterfall hammered like a heart. Master Haku said, "Sit in the spray until the body stops arguing." Ren said, "It will break me," and his breath smoked like a small fire. Mira said, "I will wait with a cloak," and stood near the lantern. Daigo said, "Punish flesh to polish souls," how quaint. Elder Sora set a lantern on a rock, its circle quiet and sure. Ren stepped under the cold sheet, and pain shouted in every bone. He said, "I am splintering," and the roar swallowed his voice. Master Haku said, "Let splinters be the sky." Mira called, "Stay with one breath," and Ren tried to find it among the noise. Daigo said, "He will last a minute," and checked his watch. Elder Sora closed her eyes, and the river seemed to lean closer. Ren thought, "If I die, I end," then thought, "If I end, I begin." He stayed until thought frayed to mist. Master Haku said, "Rise." Ren staggered out, teeth rattling, yet something bright and nameless hovered near. At noon, the Dokusan room held a bell on a low table, like a sleeping animal. Master Haku said, "Bring the sound you promised." Ren bowed and said, "The sound is the hearing before ears." Mira waited outside, palms pressed, and breathed slow. Daigo whispered, "He will sell smoke," and leaned near the screen. Elder Sora sat on the bench, still as winter bark. Master Haku rang the bell once, and the tone poured like warm metal. He said, "You brought words wearing robes." Ren said, "Then I have failed," and heat climbed his throat. Master Haku said, "Failing who?" "Ren," said the seeker, and his voice shook like a bridge in wind. Master Haku said, "Show me the seeker now." Ren stood mute, and pride cracked open like thin ice. Mira said softly through the screen, "Stay." Daigo said silence at last. Elder Sora breathed once, long and even. Master Haku said, "Return when the bell is your ribs." Ren staggered out, the hallway tilting like a ship. Afternoon clouds bruised the sky, and chores gathered like debts. Master Haku said, "Carry water up the 100 steps with this cracked jar." Ren said, "It will drain," and dread sat heavy as iron. Mira said, "Walk anyway," and tied his sash tight. Daigo said, "At least the jar knows its limits." Elder Sora handed the jar, and the crack smiled like a secret. Ren climbed, and a wet trail wrote his failure on stone. He said, "I am losing everything," and grief surged hot. Master Haku stood at the top without moving. He said, "Lose until nothing can be lost." Ren stumbled, the jar banged, and the leak grew bold. Daigo said, "A fine metaphor breaks itself." Ren shouted, "Enough," and smashed the jar on the step. Shards rang like furious bells. Silence fell, thick and intimate. Master Haku said, "You must break before you can be whole." Mira flinched, then steadied. Elder Sora knelt, gathering pieces as if they were birds. Ren stared at his empty hands and felt fear open its fist. Clouds hung low over the mountains, pressing shadows into the temple stones. Ren sat alone in the garden, shards of the broken jar beside him. He whispered, "I am ruined." Mira said, "You are not ruined, you are revealed." Daigo leaned against the wall, his smile thin as a blade, and said, "Revealed as nothing." Elder Sora brushed sand into circles, her quiet work answering more than words. Master Haku approached and said, "The jar was never meant to hold water." Ren said, "Then why test me?" His hands trembled, his voice sharp. Master Haku said, "Because you believed the jar was you." The words sank like stones into the silence. Ren said, "I am the crack, the loss, the emptiness," and tears rose uninvited. Mira touched the ground near him, whispering, "The emptiness holds." Daigo said, "The teacher tricks you into failure." Master Haku's gaze pierced, steady as iron, and he said, "You fail only the illusion." Ren's breath shuddered, and for a heartbeat, the weight shifted. In the meditation hall, incense curled like veins of smoke through sunlight. Master Haku said, "You chase peace as if it were prey." Ren said, "Without chase, I collapse." Mira said, "Collapse is rest." Daigo muttered, "Rest is failure." Elder Sora poured tea quietly, steam rising like forgiveness. Master Haku said, "Peace is not prey but shadow. It comes when you stop hunting." Ren gripped his knees and said, "Then I was never meant to find it." His voice broke across the room. Mira said, "It was here in every breath." Daigo shook his head, sneering, "Every breath is only air." Master Haku said, "Attachment names air as burden." Ren felt the words pull something loose inside his chest. He whispered, "The burden was me." Silence spread like water over stone. Elder Sora set a cup near him and bowed her head. Ren lifted it, warmth seeping into his hands, and for a moment he saw that collapse could be holding, not loss. Rain began to fall, soft and steady, drumming on the roof. Ren said, "Even the sky weeps with me." Mira said, "The sky does not keep its rain." Daigo laughed, "Or it floods until nothing stands." Elder Sora placed a bowl outside, watching drops gather. Master Haku said, "You call rain grief, yet it is release." Ren said, "Then why does it sting?" His voice trembled. Master Haku said, "Because you press it against yourself." Mira whispered, "Let it pass through." Ren stepped into the open, robes darkening as rain soaked him. He raised his arms and cried, "I am not whole, I am only breaking." Master Haku said, "Breaking is the opening." The words thundered louder than the storm. Ren's tears merged with rain, his chest loosening in shock. Elder Sora lifted the brimming bowl and held it up. Ren stared and felt the world turn upside down, yet somehow clearer. That evening, the hall was lit by a single lantern. Ren said, "Master, everything I believed was a mask." Master Haku said, "And now you see the face beneath." Daigo scoffed, "Or only emptiness staring back." Mira said, "Even emptiness can be tender." Elder Sora placed her hands together, eyes closed. Ren whispered, "I feared losing myself, but I never had myself to lose." His words trembled yet carried weight. Master Haku said, "What you feared was an illusion." Ren said, "Then all my struggle was for nothing." Master Haku said, "For nothing, which is everything." Mira's eyes glistened as she leaned closer, whispering, "You are not broken." Daigo muttered, "The story always bends toward comfort." Yet Ren felt something shift, a thread snapping and leaving him lighter. He bowed, not to prove, but to surrender. Elder Sora's breath steadied with his own, the silence thick and full. By midnight, the rain had stopped, leaving the temple still. Ren walked alone, the night air crisp hot. He whispered, "The search was never mine to win." Mira joined him barefoot on wet stone and said, "The path was always here." Daigo lingered behind, his smirk dim, eyes uncertain. Elder Sora sat by the gate, silent, gaze like the moon itself. Master Haku appeared, robe whispering with each step, and said, "The truth was never hidden." Ren said, "Then why did I bleed to find it?" Master Haku said, "Because you clung to bleeding as proof." Ren stopped, breath visible, and felt the weight leave his shoulders. Mira took his hand without words. Daigo turned away, muttering, "Peace is another prison." Elder Sora lifted her mala, and the beads clicked once, echoing. Ren whispered, "I am not lost, I am here." Master Haku bowed slightly, eyes calm as dusk. The silence wrapped Ren, and he felt it hold instead of devour. The Zendo held a brittle hush before dawn, and frost pressed its face to the windows. Master Haku said, "Sit without aim, until the bell finds you." Ren said, "If I unhook the aim, I unravel," and fear tightened his ribs. Mira said, "Let unraveling be the lesson," and set a cushion at his knee. Daigo said, "An aimless life sings a sweet lullaby," and the doorway swallowed his grin. Elder Sora settled by a post and did not speak, her breath slow as tide. Ren folded his legs, spine rising and failing, and counted edges in the dark. Master Haku said, "Let counting die." Ren released the wish to win, and the room grew heavy, then strangely light. Mira said, "When the mind screams, bow to it," and the scream flared, then sagged. Daigo said, "You are performing surrender," and the word performing stuck like sand. Elder Sora said nothing, and silence became a warm hand on his back. Ren said, "I cannot do this," and the confession rang like a clean-struck gong. Master Haku said, "Then let it do you," and Ren felt the floor tilt into night. Wind scraped along the cloister and rattled lanterns, and Ren walked as if the floor sloped. Master Haku said, "Carry the bell inside your ribs." Ren said, "My chest is a locked room," and heat rose in his face. Mira said, "Unlocking is just stopping the guard," and her smile trembled. Daigo said, "All this for a feeling," and snapped his lighter shut. Elder Sora lifted the bell rope and let it fall, soundless, her eyes bright. Ren pressed a palm to his sternum and felt a startled echo. He said, "I hear only fists beating the door." Master Haku said, Do not be the fist nor the door. Ren tried, and a storm of old vows tore at his throat. Mira said, let the vows blow out, and her whisper steadied the air. Daigo said, hurricanes end in ruin. Ren said, maybe I must be ruined, and the words left like birds. Master Haku said, ruined of clinging is whole, and the wind lost its teeth. In Dakusan, the room was bare as bone, and the bronze bell waited like a sleeping lung. Master Haku said, strike nothing. Ren said, then there is no sound, and shame pooled under his tongue. Mira waited outside, palms together, breath counting itself. Daigo whispered at the screen, the performance nears applause. Elder Sora sat on the bench, gaze level as winter noon. Master Haku said, who speaks when no word appears? Ren said, no one, and fear cracked like ice along a river. Master Haku said, be that no one. Ren's knees shook and tears rose without anchor. He said, I am so tired of being a name. Master Haku said, let the name fall like a robe. Ren closed his eyes and did not hold himself. The room widened until he could not find its edges. A warmth moved through his chest, quiet as a moth, and the bell he did not strike seemed already singing. Night gathered again, and the hall breathed like a vast animal at rest. Master Haku said, surrender the need to change this moment. Ren said, if I do, I end. And every muscle reached to flee. Mira said, end and see. And her voice carried a soft iron. Daigo said, he will trade pain for poetry, yet doubt dulled at the edges. Elder Sora set a lantern behind Ren, casting his shadow forward like a shedskin. Ren inhaled and did not shape it, exhaled and did not chase it. He said, I give up, and the words were not defeat but falling. Master Haku said, good, and did nothing more. The floor rose to meet him, and fear unhooked its claws. A wave of quiet moved through his body, bright and cold and kind. He whispered, there is no one here to save, and the seeing did not need eyes. Mira said, stay, and staying was effortless. The bell before it was struck rang everywhere at once, and nowhere at all. Dawn returned clear and spare, and frost glittered like a quiet choir on the stones. Ren stepped into the courtyard, and the world arrived without being fetched. He said, thank you, and no object held the thanks. Mira said, who do you bow to now? And Ren said, to this. Daigo stood apart, his smirk gone, and said, you look empty. Ren said, I am not a container, and the warmth surprised him. Elder Sora passed with her broom and smiled, the sand parting neatly before its straw. Master Haku said, what did you find? Ren said, nothing that can be kept. Master Haku said, keep that. The crows wrote slow black commas on the roof, and the breath breathed itself. Mira took his hand and did not need to hold. Daigo turned the lighter in his palm and did not spark it. Ren bowed, and in the bow there was only the bowing, and the morning felt newly made. Morning opened like a quiet door, and frost retreated into shade along the stones. Ren moved with the chores, and each step felt unforced. Mira said, you are lighter, and her smile landed at last. Ren said nothing to carry, and the words did not need proof. Daigo watched from the corridor and said, emptiness looks convenient. Ren said, it is ordinary, and the ordinariness soothed him. Elder Sora brushed leaves into a neat crescent, and her silence hummed like a low bell. Master Haku said, peace works when no one is watching. Ren stacked kindling, listening to sparrows lift in soft black arcs. Mira said, do you miss the chase? And Ren laughed, surprised by the sound. He said, the chase misses me. Daigo said, you will ache for old edges, yet his tone lacked teeth. Master Haku said, edges remain, but hands loosen. The sun slid along the eaves, revealing small glints in the grain. Ren breathed, and breath arrived unannounced. He said, I can meet the day as it is, and the day met him back. Kitchen steamed with rice and cedar, and windows fogged in soft squares. Ren stirred the pot, and the rhythm steadied his pulse. Mira said, "Let me ladle," and her sleeve brushed his wrist like a vow. Daigo stepped in, half grin gone, and said, "What if meaning never arrives?" Ren said, "Then this spoon is enough." Elder Sora set bowls, each aligned as if planets. Master Haku said, "Meaning visits when it is not demanded." Ren tasted the rice and said, "It tastes like yes." Mira laughed, and the sound felt clean as water. Daigo said, "Yes to what?" Ren said, "To steam, to grain, to breath." Elder Sora nodded once, and it felt like a sunrise. Master Haku said, "Feed the guests beyond your ideas of them." Ren carried a bowl to Daigo, hands steady. Daigo said, "I do not deserve it," and the words cracked like ice. Ren said, "Deserve is heavy. Eat anyway." The room warmed as if the hearth had moved into their chests. Snow began like ash, slow and sparse, and the garden accepted each flake. Mira stood beneath the pines and said, "I feared I would fail you." Ren said, "You carried me when I would not move." She said, "I carried my own doubt," and her breath laced the air. Daigo hovered by the gate and said, "Doubt is honest." Elder Sora placed a kettle on the brazier and did not speak, yet warmth spread. Master Haku said, "Compassion is doubt without teeth." Ren took Mira's hand and said, "I see your scars." She said, "They shine less when seen." Snow quickened, and the pines whispered like old friends. Daigo said, "What if seeing changes nothing?" Ren said, "Seeing is the change." Elder Sora poured tea, and the steam rose like gentle proof. Master Haku said, "Two mirrors facing become a road." Mira laughed through tears and said, "The road does not hurry." Ren bowed to her, not to fix, but to thank. The flakes thickened, and stillness held firm. Afternoon light pooled in the corridor, and dust drifted like soft constellations. Ren paused at the bell, and Elder Sora joined him with her quiet orbit. He said, "You spoke with silence when I needed it most." She did not answer, and her eyes held the whole hallway. Mira said, "Her silence taught me to listen," and set a folded cloth by the rope. Daigo said, "Silence hides mistakes," yet the claim sounded tired. Master Haku said, "Silence reveals the maker of mistakes." Elder Sora lifted one bead of her mala and let it fall. Ren said, "I hear the bell before it moves," and the rope swayed a breath's width. Mira smiled, and the screens brightened, as if agreeing. Daigo sighed and said, "Perhaps I have been loud for so long." Ren said, "You can rest here." Elder Sora's lips curved, almost a smile, and still she said nothing. Master Haku said, "A corridor is a path that stays home." Ren bowed to the space itself, and the space bowed back. Twilight gathered blue along the ridges, and the temple breathed in one long tide. Master Haku said, "Walk the grounds and greet no one, yet meet all." Ren walked, and each pine answered without voice. Mira followed at a distance and said, "I will be near." Daigo stood by the gate, lighter closed, choosing not to spark. Elder Sora sat beside the path, hands folded, steady as dusk. Ren said, "I am not the storm I expected," and the words surprised him with their gentleness. Master Haku said, "You are the sky that holds it." Ren felt the day unlatch inside his ribs. He said, "Tomorrow can arrive without my push," and the gravel agreed underfoot. Mira said, "I trust this," and her trust did not ask to be held. Daigo said, "Maybe peace is not a trick." Elder Sora lifted her gaze, and the world seemed to bow. Master Haku said, "Carry nothing, and you carry all." Ren stopped, listening to crickets draw a soft net, and the net did not bind. Dawn softened frost across the courtyard. Ren bowed, breath steady. Master Haku said, "Leave even teaching outside." Mira whispered, "If you stumble, lean." Daigo muttered, "Words won't prove truth." Elder Sora swept, beads soft in hand. Ren said, "I will not fix the sky." Haku answered, "Nor will it ask." Mira smiled, "I trust what is here." Daigo lowered his gaze. The bell shimmered in silence. Ren said, "The hunger prowls, but less sharp." Haku replied, "Feed it stones." Light broke over eaves, edges kind. In the storehouse, shards waited. Ren said, "This was anger." Mira answered, "Hold gently." Daigo scoffed, "Gold hides failure." Haku said, "Gold honors it." Elder Sora guided lacquer. Ren pressed 2 shards, hands steady. "I feared the crack more than loss," he whispered. Mira said, "The crack shows return." Daigo's voice softened. The seam gleamed like dawn. Ren lifted the jar, nothing missing, only changed. Pines bent in wind as they climbed. Haku said, "Walk with me." Ren matched steps. Mira followed, quiet. Daigo trailed, searching horizon. Elder Sora waited below. Ren said, "I hunted proof." Haku replied, "Proof circles back." Ren laughed, surprised. Mira said, "You sound like home." Daigo muttered, "Home kills questions." Haku said, "Home lets them rest." At the ridge, valley stretched, vast and plain. Ren said, "Nothing special." Haku smiled, "Exactly." Joy rose, light as air. Dusk filled the hall with villagers. Ren sat at front, Bell beside him. Mira whispered, "We are with you." Daigo stood silent at door. Elder Sora aligned mats. Haku said, "Lead without leading." Ren bowed. "Breathe." And be breathed. The hall softened into one chest. Mira glowed in stillness. Daigo lowered eyes. Elder Sora's beads clicked once. Haku watched calm spread like snow. Ren whispered, "Enough." The word meant here. The crowd rose lighter. Sunset cast copper over valley. Ren stood at terrace rail. Mira asked, "What now?" Ren said, "Nothing to chase." Daigo murmured, "I don't know how to follow." Ren said, "You don't need to." Elder Sora sat calm at steps. Haku said, "Lesson ends where it began." Ren whispered, "I am here." Mira squeezed his hand, then let go. Daigo pocketed the lighter. Elder Sora's bead clicked once. Haku bowed faintly, turned to path. Evening breathed with them.